Hello everybody and welcome to Steam Forge Live. I'm your host Jamie and I'm joined today by Sharon Matthews, the lead developer for Resident Evil 2 the board game.
Hi Jamie.
Hello, welcome. We asked the guys on Kickstarter to put their questions in. This could be a little informal Q&A. And we've got some questions written down for you, and if you guys watching along at home have got any questions, just drop them in either the comment section on YouTube or Twitch and I'll pull them through for you here.
Awesome.
We don't expect this to run for too long, but if you have got questions, we'll just keep answering them until we get bored. So, some questions that were asked via the Kickstarter update is, can we get some, this is from Luke Walker, can we get info on some available weapons?
Sure. I mean, the real question is what you want to know. I don't know if Luke had any specifics.
No, he just wanted to know as much as possible, basically.
Okay. So basically, all of the weapons that you can find in Resident Evil 2 are in the game.
Okay.
So we've got all of them all the way up from the knife through to the handgun, and then some of the more esoteric weapons like the spark shot or the Gatling gun, some of that stuff. Maybe one or two extras as well.
Oh, okay. Any hints onto how they might work in game? Because I've not played it for a long time.
We've had quite a lot of tests since then, haven't we? I mean, basically, we still use the attack dice system for using it. Different weapons will have different different colours of attack dice and different amounts of them. One interesting thing that we sort of picked up is some of the designs. So where you have a red attack dice, for example, more represents something like a single shot kind of weapon, like a pistol or a magnum, that sort of stuff. Whereas more of a area effect weapon or a blast weapon, something like the bow gun or the grenade launcher, that will then generally tend to roll the blue dice, and you'll roll more of them to represent the fact that it's over a larger radius.
I get you. Okay. We also had a question from Sharky saying, how do you plan to carry over inventories between missions? Is there a way to store them, or is it like a write down sort of thing?
I mean, obviously something like a deck box, I imagine, is probably the best for that. Certainly in terms of the actual game itself, that's really a case of remembering, noting, however you wanted to do it, what cards you have. The end step for a campaign scenario, however, we do have several, there's basically like a step chart where you work through what different items you can carry over into the next scenario.
Okay.
Some of them you'll have to leave behind because they're simply too cumbersome or because you don't need them anymore.
Or mission specific.
Exactly. Something, if you can imagine something like a key that you needed to unlock a door and now you're in that room is fairly useless to you, so you just simply discard it. Some items, such as first aid sprays, by comparison, you want to hang on to.
Do as much as possible,
You've got it. And then obviously ammunition items, you'll reload, and any excess you don't necessarily need, perhaps you discard. So.
Yeah. One from Jeffrey was, can we have some more character abilities, which also sort of ties in with someone on here called I'ma Play This. Okay. My question is, my mates and I want to play an RPD-themed playthrough as Leon, Marvin, Brad, and Chief Irons. Could you elaborate on the abilities of the villain characters?
There is a question. There is a question. That's one of my blog articles coming up. Sure, we can do. I mean, I don't necessarily know you'd want to have Irons in your party.
Okay.
He's kind of out there to kill everybody.
Right.
But yeah, so. Well, the two things. Let's go with Jeffrey's query first. So Marvin's a great starting point since he's mentioned it. So I'm going to play this. So Marvin has now got two abilities. Noble Sacrifice, we remembered from before, which is the one where he's effectively able to sacrifice himself and you don't carry on going, and you don't lose the game. He's now also picked up another one, which lets him basically resist damage. So every time you take damage, you're able to roll a dice, the encounter dice, and if you get a 5 or a 6, you sort of shrug off the damage, you keep going. Nice. So he's much more tanky than he used to be. Because he's now really got that sort of heroic feel where he really can run into danger, and it's not
shrug
the end
it
of
off, and
exactly.
If he
and
dies,
it's not the end of the
world.
worst. He can also carry extra weapons compared to everybody else as well. So he's much more of a tanky kind of, more heavy duty kind of character.
Much more geared towards the combat side of the game.
Absolutely, and much more useful for everybody. Over to the villain's abilities. So Irons, we can talk a little bit about how the PvP characters work, I guess. So one of the things we originally talked about in the Kickstarter was having them as characters where you could just drop them into any scenario and someone would play the villain character and try to thwart the other survivors from being able to complete the game. As we went through, that became, I'm not going to say unworkable, but it felt more themed if we actually created specific scenarios for them to be existing instead.
Yes, yeah.
So, and we now have two specific player versus player scenarios for the two characters to exist in.
Awesome.
Irons one which is kind of what we're really going to. Is unsurprisingly set in the RPD building.
Yeah.
Some of his abilities, he has a deck especially of traps and tricks to try and kill the other characters off.
Very nice.
Which hopefully is interesting for people to find out about.
Okay. Samurai's Edge? Someone ? Someone asked regarding those weapons from earlier.
Yeah, so who knows?
Who knows? We'll see.
We'll see.
What are the rules for the game? We've got...
well, that's a big question.
A big question. We actually have a few playthrough videos that are out there on YouTube and one, I believe, on our own channel of various playthroughs that are available to see, and you can see how the game plays through that. It will have changed since then, as that was the prototype version of the game, but it gives you a good idea and base knowledge of what these questions will.
Yeah, a good place to start. They're a good starting place, and then if you go to our Facebook group, our Facebook page, I should say, there's an awful lot of articles about the development that's happened since, sort of detailing some of the changes, and they will be going forward more. So
yeah. Will there be additional add-ons to the game in the future if the game sells well? Now, this isn't really our remit to answer, but I would assume so. I think we'd be foolish not to, if the game is doing very well, continue that sort of market, really.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a project high-level team, whereas I deal with the community and you write the rules, so it's not really our pay grade to answer that one. Over on Twitch, we've got a question from Galt87. Can we play in one super long campaign going from the streets to RPD station, then the sewers to fight the crocodile, then onto the factory fight, to fight the various stages of Birkin, get attacked by Tyrant, after the camera, then to the labs? In a nutshell, can we do the whole game?
Well, that's quite a lot of spoilers for anybody who hasn't played it.
Yeah, sorry.
We've pretty much told the whole way that the campaign's going to play out now.
Yeah.
So as a linked narrative campaign, that's exactly what you can do. So you'll start out in the A-Files playthrough in the streets. You'll battle your way through to the RPD building. You'll go through that, progressing through, trying to achieve various different objectives. At some point, you'll escape out. You'll go into the sewers, into the marshalling yard, then into the underground laboratory. That's pretty much the end of the campaign mode for the core game. And then for the B-Files
perfect. I was going to say, Luke Walker's just there.
There he is. He's back.
He's back.
Cool.
Including the B-Files and all the add-ons, how many scenarios roughly are we going to do and what maps?
Okay, well, just quickly, so back to the back to the B-Files. So then the B-Files is the B-Files, unsurprisingly, the B playthrough, and that's where you'll have, again, starting the streets, back into the RPD building, and that's where you'll see things like the T00 Tyrants, and then battle your way through that way. In terms of actual scenario numbers, off the top of my head, approximately, it's, I think, around about 20... Don't hold me to this. It's over 20. I think it's somewhere between 20 and 25. I can't remember the exact number.
So plenty enough of...
There's quite a few.
Plenty of scenarios to keep your gaming groups.
Yeah, there's a lot, especially with some of the alternate play formats, like the Extreme Battle Mode, for example. They're designed to be something which is sort of fast and fun. You can play multiple times through with your friends. So.
Vic asks, is it possible to hurt multiple zombies with the shotgun when they are on the same square?
Which shotgun? And that's probably the answer you want.
Vic, which shotgun? I don't know which I'm on this one. This one.
The answer is which shotgun. With the standard shotgun, no. Originally, although it's thematic that you can do that, you can do the double headshot, for example, or triple, even if you're lucky, in the game. For the core basic shotgun, it was just too overpowered as a game mechanic.
I get you, yeah.
And
clearing out.
Exactly.
Always.
For the stage in the game where you get it, it was simply too powerful to be able to do that. That's not to say that if you have the custom shotgun, that's a very different beast entirely.
We've got a few more questions coming in now. Star Survivor on Twitch asks, will Brad be incorporated into the plot? You alluded to another appearance if you avoid his zombie form.
Well, so Brad's is, if you don't fight Brad as a zombie, and that's definitely something the players have a choice for. They unlock the appearance of that mini-boss, as it were, exactly the same way as you do in the video game. That effectively means that later on in the campaign, you can actually then encounter Brad and use him as a playable character.
Very cool, very cool.
We haven't played around too much with changing any plot details for obvious reasons. We want to be very, very respectful and obviously truthful to what the actual Resident Evil 2 game is. But yes, you certainly can play it that way.
From Joker's Rise, do you only have to use Leon and Claire in campaign, or can you potentially use Hunk as well?
So you don't just have to use Leon and Claire. You can use any of the, I think we're 9 characters. It's 9 of the core survivor characters.
Right.
You can use any of those guys in the campaign mode, or your standard games, of course, as well. In terms of Hunk and Tofu, who are kind of really sort of 10 and 11, those guys you can use in the core game if you wanted to. They're perfectly playable. I will say that because they're geared up to be able to survive full survivor, which is really a very tough gauntlet. They might be a bit overpowered for that. That's not to say you can't use them, but it just means you might have a slightly easier
playing
time
on
with your
easy.
Hunk. Kind of like playing on easy mode.
I guess a decent question to ask regarding those characters then. During campaign mode, can you unlock characters? Because obviously Hunk is only unlocked when...
certainly. So one of the things we talked about in one of the articles was being able to unlock characters. And the nice thing that we have with that is obviously it has a nice sort of really computer game kind of feel, a video game kind of feel to it. The idea of unlocking different characters as you go through.
Getting those, like, I guess, modern day achievements is
Exactly.
what it would have been back in...
Who doesn't like cheese, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So... but no, when we go through the actual campaign mode, you can unlock certain characters by achieving certain tasks. Cool. One of them, for example, we've already talked about with Brad. Another great example is you can actually save Marvin. If you want to do that.
Nice.
So obviously that works very well. The interesting part to that is that we've designed it so we don't make it mandatory to have to unlock characters. The big thing about Resident Evil 2, the board game, is we want it to be completely accessible to people.
Regardless of skill level and the playthroughs you need to do to unlock people.
So you've always got that level of immersive kind of play for people who want to be, the real super fans who want to play the game and have it just exactly as it is. So those guys, we can't save Brad and then use him later on. Sorry, not save Brad and then use him later on. That's silly. Stuff like that. That's exactly there for those guys. The flip side is if you want to be one of the players who kind of just wants to just rock up and use your favourite character.
Use your favourites,
The capacity's there to do that too.
Fantastic. From Luke Walker again, does the Colt SAA have different damage or stats to the normal handgun?
Yes.
Yes. That's easy. Easy one there for you, Luke.
Very, very simple. Yes, it absolutely does. It does. It uses different dice indeed.
Oh, okay. Over on Twitch, we've got one. Through the development of the game, the initial release date looks logical and doable, or the project ended up far bigger than it was originally planned? So I guess this is more of a production question.
It's more of a production one. The project is, in terms of, because Resident Evil 2 is very much a, it's limited to the wrong word. It's very much a sort of known entity in terms of how much we have to play with and work with. We'd already planned obviously the different expansions, that sort of stuff that we could look at going for. We did add some extra ones on from the community during the Kickstarter. Some of those obviously being cosmetic things like monster unlocks or sort of the terrain pack, for example, and dice. But a few of the others, like the Moth, all hail the Moth.
Yes, all hail.
That one certainly added a little bit of extra time, but it hasn't been ridiculous. It hasn't sort of pushed us too far.
Cool, fantastic. One I remember from the Kickstarter page. I'm gonna lose it now. Now that I've said I've remembered it. It's gone. Someone's asked another question.
There you go.
Good.
Joker's come to save you.
Joker's rise. As someone who has tested the board game over the changes, what has been your personal favourite scenario or map?
The one that really...
Whilst you answer that, I'm going to search Kickstarter.
No worries.
Find that
the one that really surprised me in terms of how much I really enjoyed playtesting through it all, the ones I should say, are the giant alligator scenarios. That's not to say I didn't think they'd be any good. It's more so much that they were very much a sort of part of the game that I don't think is anyone's sort of favourite part of the game. It's either the video game, yes, certainly. I don't think that's anyone's sort of favourite part. It's as much as is what it is. But there's a real sort of tense feeling to those particular scenarios when you're sort of fleeing away from them, the giant alligator as it tries to consume you. The other one, of course, would be the Birkin Stage 5, that particular scenario. We had a lot of fun playtesting that one. It's a very different scenario to all of the others.
Very cool. The one I remembered, someone asked why aren't... So what was the decision behind taking typewriters away from the board? I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
The simple answer is it's thematically, obviously, it doesn't fit with necessarily Resident Evil, where once you use a typewriter in the video game, it stays where it is. That's what it is. However, two things really. Firstly, we wanted people to have to go forward to find these things. So removing one from the table when you actually used it was really good, because at that point people then have to they're forced to progress onwards. And that kind of ties back to the other bit, which is one of our more gamey playtester groups. Which is exactly why you have.
Well, yes, what you have. You need the full spectrum from super casual up to I'm going to try and break this game and ruin your rules writing show.
You've got it. And the crucial point is those guys just had someone sitting next to the typewriter for the entire game. Their job was to sit next to the typewriter. As soon as it gets close to the end of the deck, they just use the ink ribbon. And that's exactly the experience we don't want to have. That's not very survival horror. We should have people push forward.
One person's job is just to sit there watching everybody else
play the game
and be like, is it my turn to... Yep.
It's a similar sort of thing to what we had. Originally we had in a very, very early stages, we had a group where their favourite tactic was the 4 of them would sit down to play, 3 of them would get themselves killed immediately.
Right.
And then that way one player could then carry on going, but then had all of the extra ammunition, had all of the extra sort of bonuses from extra players. And that's, again, not what we wanted to do. No. And that's around the time we introduced the idea that it's completely cooperative. If someone dies, it's game over.
It's game over, yeah. No, that makes sense. I think that makes sense. From Egghead Hobbies, hey Sharon and Jamie, so let's say there was a tease about Vested Sherry at the end of the Kickstarter campaign. What could you tell us about that?
Keep an eye on it.
Keep an eye on it.
We will.
We
certainly haven't forgotten.
Yeah, it was a tease for a reason. Luke Walker's back. Are there any Easter eggs or nods to Resident Evil 3 as you are in the police station?
That's a pretty good question. Yeah. I mean, that's...
Is it a good question in the film? Like, I could.
It's a pretty good question. You could put that in. Obviously, we've made this game exactly Resident Evil 2. So one thing we aren't going to do is introduce Nemesis, for example. Because whilst that does occur roughly at the same time as when Leon and Claire are running around the police station, it simply doesn't really fit in terms of the actual game itself, the spectrum of it. Now, certainly you obviously go through some of the same rooms and some of the same areas as that.
Yep.
So yeah, there is obviously going to be some similarity, but no directly really obvious kind of characters or enemies.
Okay. One question just came in from Joker's Rise again. If you were to recommend a team of characters for 2 to 4 players, who would you recommend and why?
That's a good question. So the really important thing when you're building a team and everyone sort of sits down to play the game is you have to think very carefully about weapon allocation. One of the things we sort of didn't touch on when we talked about weapons earlier is just like the video game, characters have a certain amount of certain weapons they can and can't use based on their expertise with firearms, or alternatively, sort of how bulky the firearm might be, that sort of stuff. If you have a character like Sherry, for example, she simply can't attack. So you have to think very carefully about what weapons you have. We had more than one playtest group who sort of said, we want to use all these cool characters, and then found they couldn't use a Magnum or couldn't use a grenade launcher, and found themselves very, really struggling against bosses for those very reasons. So you have to think very carefully about build. It depends on your skill level as well. If you're beginner players, Leon and Claire are great first starters because they're designed to be user-friendly.
You've got it. Out-the-box experience.
You've got it. They're designed to be really sort of user-friendly, you're very forgiving kind of characters. Ada is always useful to have. And Robert Kendo is nicknamed the One-Man Army in this office. He's never a bad guy to have on the team. That said, personally, I really enjoy the Brad character. I think he's got he's very distinct, very unique playstyle. I think that's true of all of the survivors you have who kind of came along as the sort of Kickstarter extras. We've designed the core characters to be your very kind of
they're
your basic
your first
starting point.
Of
exactly.
the game,
they're your starting point characters. They've all got very useful abilities, that sort of stuff. The extra characters, the unlocked ones, really kind of push the boundaries of they're a bit more weird, wacky, that kind of thing. They've got
I guess it's like that whole thing of like once you've got a bit of experience of the game, you might want to test yourself a little bit more and play with not a handicapped character, but with a different style.
Exactly it, and those characters represent more of a skew towards one direction or another, which is good.
Egghead Hobbies, since the New Year's holiday is ending in China, so Chinese New Year, do you have any updates on when we'll get to see the final miniatures? I do not.
It's one for production, I think.
It's production. So the community team, and for sharing as well, we get stuff sort of day to day as it comes in. The project team deal with the future stuff.
One thing I will say is that I know they're looking, as soon as we have anything to be able to share with you guys, we absolutely will.
Yeah, 100%. Whenever anything lands on my desk, it's pretty much I'm asking Ronan, can we get a video out and can we get pictures for social media? And as soon as we get anything, we'll share it straight away. Suspense. Will Zombie Leon, aka Backseat Zombie, make an appearance?
Sadly not.
Oh.
I'm afraid. I know that's been one of your.
That's been a hotly requested.
That's been a hotly requested thing by you, Suspense. But I'm afraid there's nothing to say you probably can't get a Leon model and zombie him up.
Yeah,
that's probably your best bet.
Luke Walker. What is the ideal amount of players, and what is Brad's special ability?
Huh. Okay, so the ideal player, the game is designed, you can play it solo if you want to hardcore it. Alternatively, you can play it with 2, 3, 4 players. There's not really any ideal amount of players. I'd probably recommend, I will say the game experience changes depending on how many players you have. So if you've got 4, for example, things are a bit tighter in terms of actual time limits you've got to work with, but
because
you have more.
Draw more cards.
Draw more cards. But you also have more increments to be able to reset things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have a bit more ammunition. If you're playing at 3 players, that's kind of a middle point. And then 2 players tends to be a little bit more kind of focused. You've got a little bit more luxury to walk around and explore. So at the same time, but you haven't got quite as much ammunition.
Less resources.
You've got less resources. Now, in terms of the Brad special ability, he's got 2. Okay. One is called Chicken Heart, which we all know about.
We've seen that one.
And that means when he makes an evade roll, and as part of his move, he can dodge an extra square.
Very nice.
Which means he's very, very fast.
Super fast.
The other one is very much based on what I'm sure will be familiar to most people who are familiar with the games, a cutscene from the Resident Evil 3 game, where he's fighting off as, when you first encounter him actually in the streets, as you run through, where he's shooting at some zombies and running away. And that's what I'm going to give you for the moment. Okay. But I will say that it probably ties into the first ability.
Oh, okay. I think I can make an educated guess about that one. Over on Twitch, we've got somebody asking about the retro pack.
Yes. What about the retro pack?
Any more info about the bonus tiles featured in them?
Certainly. So we have the tiles that come in the retro pack are specific locations from the Resident Evil 2 universe that you would recognise. One of them, for example, is the Kendo gun shop.
Yep.
Then we have, I think the Kendo gun shop is one of them. Certainly. Then we have others like the bus is another example of one. Okay. And they're really things that you can drop into your game to make it feel more immersive and make it feel perfectly exactly like what the actual video game was.
Game is. Yeah.
The other thing is obviously it lets us have a couple of change points without changing any rules or anything dramatic to the user experience, but we can move spawn points around for enemies, that sort of stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Kendo gun shop's a great example. We can shift all of the spawn points right up to the windows, so if any enemies do appear, they smash through the windows to come after you.
Just like it. Back over on YouTube, Luke Walker. Plenty of questions from Luke today. He asked, you had a great article on the puzzles, so thank you, Sharon, for writing that.
Thanks, Luke.
Do you have any more information to come?
I certainly can do if you'd like. Really, it's what did you want to know?
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about that in how the puzzle system worked, where our original ideas we tried around with. I will say the sort of soft puzzle system we ended up on, I know there were a couple of concerns I saw from a couple of Kickstarter comments saying that, I don't know the video game necessarily, is that going to hinder my playing experience?
I was going to bring up what somebody said. So JAFO. Silly question time. Why can't we use C4 to blow up a door? That kind of stuff.
Well, you can use C4 to blow up a door, which is interesting, but because that's actually in the game. I think that's an unfortunate example he happened to choose. Yeah. But one of the crucial things, again, like we originally said, we don't want this game to be exclusive. So although it's definitely there for the fans, it's definitely there as a nod to anybody who's played the video games. They'll recognise lots of parts of it and aspects of the game. You don't necessarily need to have intrinsic understanding of how the game works to be able to progress and do things. The soft puzzle system is really designed around keeping players guessing as to how they're going to complete a scenario. Yeah. But once they actually start exploring and finding items, it's really, it'll become very straightforward for them. So it certainly doesn't make it too much of a hindrance.
Okay. This one's sort of a pie in the sky question.
Okay.
If you could take any character from any Resident Evil game and include them in this board game, and Capcom gave it the thumbs up, which one would you choose?
Barry Burton.
Barry Burton. I don't know who that is.
It has to be Barry Burton. Okay. Barry Burton is probably the most. He's just really cool.
Okay. Jill sandwich.
And that's why.
That's why. Okay. If you couldn't hear that, that was our.
It was a Jill sandwich. It was a Jill sandwich.
Jill sandwich. And that seems to be about it. If you've got any more questions, guys, drop them in. I'm just going to go through quickly through the Kickstarter for the last update. See if there are any questions in there that we've not got ourselves to. But other than that, I think we're
Okay.
pretty much round up. We've been here for about 25 minutes, so roughly our half an hour time slot that we had planned for it. Is that Bill?
That's Barry, yeah.
That's Barry.
And,
Sorry, Barry.
funnily enough, that's the cutscene talking about the Jill sandwich.
Yeah. Some of your supporters have not had any.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, so it's from a super backer on Kickstarter, Barry Kendall, just reminding us that it's not always about the hardcore Resident Evil fans, that we do need to accommodate the people who just love board games.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to think that we've achieved that. It's something where, again, the game is designed with that in mind. So, again, people can enjoy this, whatever their experience is.
Yeah.
If you haven't had any experience of Resident Evil before, then this is a great starting point. If you have had loads of experience with Resident Evil, you should find a lot of familiarities with this.
Yeah. All right, we have a few more questions come in since we're threatened to end. Once development is complete and your rules are finalised, how big do you anticipate the rulebook to be?
That's a good question. I think the rulebook is currently about 24 pages. Don't hold me to that, because obviously things move around in terms of actually when you start putting in examples, that sort of stuff.
It's the layout that changes dramatically, because if you have like a big map section that takes up half a page,
it obviously takes up large areas. One thing we've tried to do, though, with the rulebook is introduce it the same way as you do with a video game. So so rather than just throwing all of the rules at you and saying, these are the rules, learn them, and then you can go play the game, it steps you slowly through the first scenario. So it literally, the first few pages are telling you how to have an activation, how to do enemy reactions at the tension deck, and then kind of says, okay, so now you're ready to try the first scenario, and talk you through getting to the police station. Once you've done that, you can then move on, and it tells you a few more advanced rules you'll need for the next scenario, and then it will slowly introduce, the game slowly introduces the concepts and the rules as you go through in an organic fashion, so that way it's easy to learn.
I think that's the perfect way to do rule books, is learn as you go along. So it's not too much when you have your group of 4 new players, and you're trying to teach them the game, and I think it's a good way to go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Resident Evil, we're very fortunate in that the game it's very user friendly, it's very intuitive. The whole point of we've always started out with the design is to make a game that people can just pick up and start playing and go through. At the same time, it's obviously difficult to master when you start thinking about how your team composition will be, what weaponry you can use, that sort of stuff.
Suspense. Oh, sorry, we've got a few more. Joker's Rise again asks, would you have including Rebecca or Richard as a pledge goal? Rebecca or Richard? Does that mean?
So that's characters from Resident Evil 1 because we wanted this to be Resident Evil 2 specifically. No Stars members, I'm afraid. Beyond obviously Brad, as we know.
Luke Walker, you mentioned that bad characters like Irons can set traps. Are there any other traps just naturally in the maps?
So that's a specific thing to, well, yes and no. The tension deck has some things that you might consider to be traps.
Like I say, traps is probably a word that conjures an image of like a pitfall. Or something.
Exactly. There are things like, for example, there's a tension deck tension deck card in the B-Files game called Creak, which is effectively a door sort of creaking open, on the wind or whatever else, and then enemies can then subsequently move through and chase after you. Stuff like that you could consider traps. But the items that we might have, the events you might have in the Irons deck, for example, are things like handgun ammo, which actually is blanks. Or flickering lights, where he's obviously shot out some of or changed the electrics, the wiring, and there's sort of flickering lights. So you can play that so players miss their attacks, that sort of thing. The Irons game is very much a subtle game of kind of trying to hunt down people very slowly and sort of weaken them, so then you can get to them and then finish them off. Rather than a sort of straight shootout.
You just shooting out. Do all characters have the same amount of health? No. If you look at somebody like Sherry, for example, she's considerably weaker than everybody else. And one of the characters starts off wounded. Suspense. Any chance the Pledge Manager will be reopened?
That's not one for me, I'm afraid.
That's way up there. That's a top level decision. I would assume not, but we never know. Does each character have a starting loadout?
So at the start of every scenario, if you're playing campaign mode, that's a sequential steps. That's slightly different to this. At the start of every scenario, if you're playing them as standalone games, everyone will have a handgun, a knife, and generally from there they'll then get to choose from a variety of sort of bonus items, such as first aid sprays, shotguns, bowguns, whatever else that are appropriate to the particular point in the game where you would start this scenario, and then the players can actually choose to allocate those out amongst the characters.
Okay, very good. If you die while playing as Birkin, do you mutate, and how does that play out?
That's exactly what you'd expect. William Birkin has
terribly for Birkin, probably.
No, actually terribly for everybody else. He's pretty angry when he mutates.
Yeah.
So William Birkin has a rule called malformation, which means if he dies, or if someone does, there's another game trigger, or actually a couple of game triggers that can occur within that particular scenario, which means he can immediately malformate into Birkin stage 1.
Okay.
And that's the point where it gets pretty scary.
Do you think playing as Tofu is a tough experience or a decently even experience?
So, depending on who you talk to amongst our playtesters, Tofu is either totally busted and is ridiculously overpowered, or is the really hard way to play Force Survival. Right. So the honest answer is it tends to be on how your outlook on how you want to play the game is, I suspect, is the honest answer. It's fairly safe to assume that if you're playing Force Survivor with the intended characters, and again, you can play with other characters, although I wouldn't probably recommend that because it's pretty hard. Brutal. Hunk is the guy that you're going to go and kill the world with. He's the guy with all the guns, all the ammo, and you're probably going to try and battle your way through that way. And Tofu is going to be really sort of try and dodge away, being nimble, and that's pretty much what you'd expect. Fantastic.
Well, I think that's all our questions now. We need to be getting into the realms of stuff we can't answer.
Okay.
So we've had that question already. What is the next update going to be about? I think it's a good way to end, and then you can wait for Monday for any more
information. That's a great question. I'm going to see I'm going to have a review over the questions we came up with on here, see if there's anything interesting that I think I can elaborate on a little bit more, and we'll go from there.
Fantastic. And one last question that's just come in before we finish. Do you believe in the moth?
I believe in the moth. Yeah. I actually worked on some of the rules for the moth late last night. I definitely believe in the moth.
Fantastic. Right, guys, thank you for joining us today on Steamforged Live. I know it's been a short one. If you see people commenting saying, I missed the live stream, where can I view it? It will be available to view on YouTube. And we shall see you again next week for, I believe, some God tier.
Cool.
So thank you very much, Sherwin, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I look forward to reading Monday's blog post. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Bye.